I think youth ministry is one of the hardest jobs in the church. A student doesn't like your Bible study. They'll go home and tell their parents. Parents will hear that, and then the senior pastor will hear the youth group is not fun. And then they will come and tell the youth pastor, why is the youth group not fun? You have this dynamic of the teenager, the parent, and the youth pastor all giving pressure to the youth pastor. I encourage youth workers, volunteers, teachers to be faithful. I like to liken it to good kimchi. Good kimchi is not oftentimes when it's first made, but when it turns ripe. In ministry too, sometimes we have to wait till it turns ripe. Tell my students the most important time of youth group is my name is Danny Kwon. I serve at Rooted Ministry as the Senior Director of Youth Ministry Content and Cross-Cultural Initiatives. But before that, I'd like to say I was a youth pastor for 29 years at one Korean church.
What is one thing you wish parents understood about the role of the church in their teenager's life?
Yeah. For a long time in the immigrant church, Korean church especially, because of language, the youth pastors were very important in the lives of teenagers. We separated out from the adult congregation who spoke Korean and the youth ministry that was in English. And so the youth pastors were very important, and the parents just kind of sent their kids to the youth group. But the Bible and the research is showing that the role of the parents in discipling their kids is the most important factor of kids remaining in faith after they graduate youth group. And being a youth pastor for 29 years at my church, I always taught my students that the most important time of youth group is after you leave youth group, not the 6 or 7 years that you're in youth group. And again, the Bible and the research is showing that the greatest factor in that is parents discipling their kid. Now, I understand in the immigrant church why we separated out youth group from the adult ministry because of language. But as more and more parents are now getting more fluent in English, the world has become global. They understand American and Western culture more. I hope to see more and more parents becoming the primary discipler and the primary person who shapes the faith of their teenager, because it's biblical and the research is showing this is the biggest reason and factor why kids remain in faith after they leave youth group or they leave the church after youth group. And I hope parents in the church will understand that more and more and grow in that role.
What is one thing you wish church leaders knew about the challenges youth pastors face?
Yeah, okay. I think ministry is hard in general. All ministry is hard. Being a youth pastor for 29 years at one church, I always see the Korean assistant pastor, the Korean 부목사님, as one of the hardest roles. But being in youth ministry, I also think is one of the hardest ministry roles in the church. First of all, people see it as babysitting, especially the adults. Senior pastors often see it as a stepping stone, a temporary position to other future ministries. And then, for example, as a youth pastor, even me doing it for 29 years, like I always did middle school small groups. And I always give this example: if like a student doesn't like your Bible study, they'll go home and tell their parents, I didn't like Bible study this week. I'm bored of youth group. It's not fun. They'll tell their parents, and the parents will hear that, and then they might complain to the church, an elder, an assistant pastor, the senior pastor. And then the senior pastor will hear the youth group is not fun. And then they will come and tell the youth pastor, why is the youth group not fun? Why is it boring? And so you have this dynamic of the teenager, the parent, and the youth pastor and the church leadership all giving pressure to the youth pastor. And so I always felt like the youth pastor really has a difficult role in the church. I mean, even for me, not to brag or charang, but I have a PhD. I've written youth ministry books. I'm a professor of youth ministry. But in my church, no one cares. My senior pastor doesn't care. Parents don't care. Teenagers don't care. And that's okay. As Paul says in Philippians 3, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Jesus Christ. And I say that because I have all these credentials, but no one cares. It's about their kid, about how happy the parents are, how happy the kids are. If the senior pastor knows that the parents are happy. And so I think youth ministry is one of the hardest jobs in the church, because ultimately what people care about, sometimes it feels like it's about the happiness of their kid, or the happiness of the church members, or the happiness of the church leadership, and not the youth pastor at all.
What encouragement or advice would you give to those working with youth?
Okay, yeah. One of the most important things I like to share with those serving teenagers, whether a teacher, a volunteer, or a pastor, from 1 Corinthians 3, where the Apostle Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gives the growth. That youth work, sometimes you don't see the fruit of your ministry right away. You teach them Bible studies, you hang out with them, you do Friday night or Wednesday night, you preach a sermon, and it's not always evident of the planting and watering that you're doing. But we really have to have that hope that God gives the growth, and God gives the growth in His time. And like I said, when I tell my students the most important time of youth group is after you leave youth group, I say that same message to teachers, volunteers in youth ministry, and youth pastors, to really have that long, eternal view of youth ministry, that God gives the growth, and it's in His time when He wants to see things through fruition. I like to liken it to good kimchi. Good kimchi is not oftentimes when it's first made, but when it turns ripe, 이거, And so in ministry too, sometimes we have to wait till it turns ripe. And in youth ministry, sometimes it's not always ripe right away. It's not always the fruit you will see right away. It's not always where we will see God's growth right away, but in God's timing. And so I encourage youth workers, volunteers, teachers to be faithful, to Just continue to serve your teenagers, and in God's time, He will show His fruitfulness. Our job is faithfulness. God's job is the fruitfulness.
Sola Network exists to influence the emerging generation of Asian Americans and those who lead them with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Find our articles, book reviews, podcasts, and more at sola.network. If you would like to partner with Sola Network through collaboration, networking, volunteering, or giving, please contact us through the website.